Do you remember those old county fair cookbooks? The ones packed with recipes you couldn't find anywhere else? They were filled with blue ribbon pies, secret family casseroles, and desserts that made neighbors line up for a taste. Back then, these dishes weren't just food. They were a celebration of community and tradition. Today, we're dusting off those pages and bringing back 30 unforgettable recipes from the 1970s. Blue ribbon apple pie. Every county fair has its legends, and few are as sweet as the story of the blue ribbon apple pie. Picture it. A sunlit afternoon in the 1970s, rows of baked goods laid out on gingham-covered tables, judges making their slow, serious rounds while hopeful bakers hover nearby. Among the entries, one pie stands out, not because it's fancy, but because it embodies everything a fair is about: simplicity, skill, and a whole lot of heart. Apple pie was the ultimate test of a home baker's talent. The crust had to be perfectly flaky, the filling just sweet enough, and the balance of cinnamon and nutmeg subtle but unmistakable. Winning the blue ribbon wasn't just about bragging rights. It meant your recipe might be printed in the next community cookbook, passed around and baked in countless kitchens for years to come. The ingredients were as humble as they come: flour, butter, sugar, apples fresh from a nearby orchard, and maybe a splash of lemon juice if you were feeling fancy. Many bakers swore by lard for the crust, claiming it made the flakiest layers, while others insisted on butter for its rich flavor. Either way, nothing went to waste. A few bruised apples. Perfectly fine. That slightly too soft stick of butter? Even better. Some bakers even tossed in a handful of raisins or a drizzle of molasses for a bit of extra sweetness, especially if sugar was running low or if they wanted to add a personal twist. Making the pie was as much ritual as a recipe. Rolling out the dough on a flour-dusted table, carefully layering the apples and crimping the crust just so, it was a kind of domestic art passed down through generations. Families often gathered in the kitchen, each person playing a role from peeling apples to taste testing the filling. The first bite, warm and fragrant, was more than just dessert. It was a taste of home, of autumn harvests, and of shared memories. Today, apple pie might show up in artisan bakeries with caramel drizzles, sea salt, or even cheddar cheese baked into the crust. But the heart of the dish hasn't changed. At its core, the blue ribbon apple pie remains a symbol of tradition, comfort, and community pride, carrying with it the spirit of countless fairs and family tables through the years. Funnel cake. Few scents capture the magic of a county fair quite like a funnel cake sizzling in hot oil. Long before Instagram-worthy desserts piled high with toppings became the norm, funnel cake was the ultimate fair treat. Golden, crispy, and dusted with a blizzard of powdered sugar that inevitably ended up on your shirt. In the 1970s, these cakes weren't just a snack. They were a rite of passage.
Funnel cakes are a classic summertime American treat. I have fond memories of eating them at the county fair when I was growing up.
County fairs were community events, bringing together farmers, families, and friends, and nothing brought people running to the concession stand faster than the sight of those lacy spirals frying to perfection. Funnel cake has deep roots in American food history, brought over by Pennsylvania Dutch and German immigrants who made similar fried dough desserts. By the 1970s, it had become a staple at rural fairs across the country, thanks to its affordability and pure fun factor. The ingredients were as basic as they come: flour, eggs, sugar, milk, and a pinch of baking powder. You didn't need anything fancy, just a steady hand and a funnel, or in a pinch, a well-rinsed ketchup bottle. Making a funnel cake was part performance, part cooking. The batter was poured through the funnel in swirling circles into a pot of hot oil, sizzling immediately and puffing up into a golden, crispy masterpiece. A quick flip, a shake of powdered sugar, and it was ready to be devoured while still warm. Today, you might see funnel cakes topped with chocolate syrup, whipped cream, or even deep-fried candy bars. But there's something special about the original version. Simple, sweet, and slightly messy. Eating a funnel cake at the fair wasn't just about satisfying your sweet tooth. It was about standing shoulder to shoulder with neighbors, sticky-fingered and smiling, soaking in the shared joy of summer. Corn dogs. Nothing says county fair quite like a corn dog. That glorious marriage of hot dog and golden cornbread batter served on a stick. In the 1970s, before frozen boxes of corn dogs appeared in every grocery store freezer aisle, these were a special treat you only got once or twice a year, usually from a rickety food stand with a hand-painted sign and a line that wrapped around the midway. They were cheap, portable, and perfect for walking around while checking out livestock competitions or eyeing the Ferris wheel. The idea of battering and frying a hot dog wasn't entirely new, but the county fair gave it a stage and turned it into an icon. The ingredients were simple and accessible: a package of hot dogs, wooden sticks, cornmeal, flour, eggs, and milk. Some recipes included a spoonful of sugar for sweetness or a dash of paprika for kick, but frugality was key. Families could make a batch at home for a fraction of what you'd spend buying them at the fair, though they never quite tasted the same without the hum of a crowd and the smell of hay in the air. Preparation was straightforward and a little bit thrilling. Each hot dog was skewered, dipped into a thick cornmeal batter, and then lowered into a pot of bubbling oil. Within minutes, it emerged crispy and golden, ready to be dunked into ketchup or mustard, or both if you were feeling wild. Today, corn dogs are everywhere, from freezer sections to amusement parks, sometimes even dressed up with gourmet sausages or fancy aioli. But back then, they represented pure fairground fun. A corn dog wasn't just food. It was a handheld piece of nostalgia, a reminder that simple pleasures often taste the best when eaten under the summer sun. Buttermilk biscuits. Few things feel as homey or as comforting as a warm buttermilk biscuit pulled straight from the oven. In the 1970s, these tender, flaky rounds weren't just breakfast food. They were a staple of county fairs, church suppers, and family gatherings. They were the kind of humble, dependable recipe that every fair cookbook seemed to include, often with handwritten notes in the margins about which brand of flour was best, or whether to use lard or butter.
These biscuits are super flaky, buttery, and a perfect crowd pleaser that is insanely easy to pull together.
Biscuits were judged not only by their flavor, but also by their height and texture, with proud bakers vying for that coveted blue ribbon and bragging rights that lasted until the next fair rolled around. The ingredients were simple and economical, especially for families keeping a close eye on the grocery budget. Flour, baking powder, salt, cold butter, or lard, and tangy buttermilk came together to create a dough that was greater than the sum of its parts. Buttermilk wasn't just for flavor, its acidity helped tenderize the dough and create that classic rise, transforming what could have been plain bread into something special. Some families even made their own buttermilk by adding a splash of vinegar or lemon juice to milk when the real thing wasn't available, proving that resourcefulness was just as important as skill in the kitchen. Making biscuits was a bit of an art form. The dough had to be handled gently. Too much kneading, and you'd end up with hockey pucks instead of airy layers. Rolling and folding the dough created those perfect buttery strata, while cutting them with a well-floured biscuit cutter kept the edges neat. They baked quickly, filling the kitchen with a warm, buttery aroma that seemed to draw people in from every corner of the house. At county fairs, they were often served piping hot, sometimes with sausage gravy ladled on top or split open and filled with slices of country ham. Today, biscuits often appear alongside trendy brunch items like avocado toast or chicken sandwiches drizzled with hot honey. But back then, they were simpler, just a pat of butter, a drizzle of sorghum syrup, or a spoonful of homemade jam. No matter the decade, a good buttermilk biscuit still tastes like love, tradition, and the heart of home cooking. Homemade cinnamon rolls. The smell of homemade cinnamon rolls drifting through a kitchen can stop a person in their tracks. In the 1970s, when county fairs were in full swing, cinnamon rolls weren't just breakfast, they were a centerpiece of community pride.
How do you wake 'em up in the morning? Around these parts, we bake 'em an eye-opener.
Well, who baked those cinnamon rolls? We'd really like to know.
He did. That's right.
Fair cookbooks almost always included at least one treasured cinnamon roll recipe, often passed down through generations and fiercely guarded by bakers who swore theirs was the fluffiest, stickiest, or most perfectly glazed. Winning a ribbon for cinnamon rolls was no small feat. It meant your technique, timing, and touch with yeast dough were nothing short of legendary. The ingredients were straightforward and budget-friendly. Flour, sugar, yeast, butter, eggs, and milk formed the soft, pillowy dough. The filling was a simple but magical combination of cinnamon, brown sugar, and more butter. Lots of butter. Some cooks added raisins or chopped nuts, while others insisted the rolls should be pure and unadulterated, a swirl of sweetness without distraction. In true 1970s fashion, everything was made from scratch, right down to the powdered sugar glaze drizzled on top while the rolls were still warm. Making cinnamon rolls was a labor of love. The dough needed to rise slowly, then be rolled out, spread with the fragrant filling, and tightly rolled before being sliced into perfect spirals. They baked until golden, filling the house with a smell so irresistible that neighbors might just drop by at the exact moment they came out of the oven. Today, cinnamon rolls show up in coffee shops and bakeries with elaborate toppings like cream cheese frosting, bacon crumbles, or even caramel drizzle. But the homemade version has a charm that can't be replicated by any chain cafe. In every soft, sticky bite lies a piece of the past, a taste of family kitchens, Sunday mornings, and county fair memories. Tuna noodle casserole. Tuna noodle casserole was the quiet hero of countless 1970s dinner tables, and no county fair cookbook was complete without at least one version of it. It wasn't flashy or exotic, but it was practical, affordable, and deeply comforting. The kind of dish that could feed a family of 6 with a few pantry staples and a little creativity.
To what I think is just an absolutely incredible, profoundly comforting, and very, very satisfying casserole.
Back then, casseroles weren't just recipes. They were a way of life. They traveled easily to church potlucks, froze well for busy weeknights, and gave home cooks a chance to stretch a can of tuna into something hearty and satisfying. For families trying to make every dollar count, a single casserole dish could mean leftovers for lunch the next day, a true blessing in frugal households. The ingredient list was a perfect snapshot of the era. A can or two of tuna, a bag of egg noodles, a can of cream of mushroom soup, and a splash of milk formed the base. A handful of frozen peas or diced celery, might be added for color and crunch, and the topping, arguably the most beloved part, was often made of crushed potato chips, buttery breadcrumbs, or even crumbled saltine crackers. These ingredients were cheap, readily available, and easy to keep on hand, which was essential for families juggling tight budgets and busy schedules. Some cooks got creative, adding a splash of Worcestershire sauce or a sprinkle of cheddar cheese for extra flavor, proving that even a humble dish had room for personal flair. Assembling the casserole was as straightforward as it gets. Cook the noodles, stir in the tuna and soup, spread it all in a greased dish, sprinkle the crunchy topping, and bake until bubbly and golden. The aroma alone could call kids to the table before anyone rang the dinner bell. At county fairs, tuna noodle casserole often appeared in recipe contests, praised not for sophistication, but for its ability to bring comfort and practicality to everyday cooking. Today, tuna noodle casserole might not appear on trendy restaurant menus, but it has experienced a quiet revival among home cooks who appreciate retro flavors and easy weeknight meals. Modern versions might swap in fresh mushrooms, Greek yogurt in place of condensed soup, or artisanal breadcrumbs for the topping. Yet at its heart, it's still the same dish that graced 1970s tables. A humble, hearty reminder of simpler times, shared family dinners, and the magic of turning a few ordinary ingredients into something extraordinary. Tamale pie. Tamale pie was a dish that spoke to both thrift and creativity, a perfect fit for 1970s county fair cookbooks. It wasn't an actual tamale, of course, but rather a casserole inspired by the flavors of one. In an era when stretching a pound of ground beef was a weekly challenge for many households, tamale pie offered a clever solution. It combined simple, inexpensive ingredients into a dish hearty enough to feed a crowd and flavorful enough to feel like a treat. At county fairs, recipes for tamale pie were often highlighted as dependable family favorites, with variations reflecting each cook's personal touch. The foundation was straightforward and affordable. Ground beef was browned with onions and maybe a green pepper or two, then mixed with canned tomatoes, corn, and beans if you had them. A packet of chili powder or a few shakes of paprika added warmth and color. The star of the dish, though, was the topping, a layer of soft, slightly sweet cornbread batter spread over the savory filling. As the casserole baked, the cornbread puffed up, golden and tender, soaking up all those rich, spicy juices underneath. Making tamale pie was about ease and efficiency. Everything came together in one dish, which meant less cleanup. A bonus for busy families. It was also endlessly adaptable. If you didn't have beef, you could use ground turkey or leftover pork. No fresh vegetables on hand? Canned worked just fine. Even the level of heat could be adjusted, from mild and kid-friendly to tongue-tinglingly bold. Today, tamale pie might be dressed up with artisan cheeses or roasted peppers, but its heart remains the same. It's still the cozy, crowd-pleasing casserole that once earned blue ribbons and brought families running to the dinner table on chilly nights. Hamburger hot dish. Hamburger hot dish was the backbone of many Midwestern tables in the 1970s. A casserole so iconic it practically deserves its own place in the County Fair Hall of Fame. At its core, it was about one thing: taking a single pound of ground beef and stretching it to feed as many hungry mouths as possible. This dish wasn't fancy or pretentious. It was practical, filling, and deeply tied to the rhythms of family life.
It's super easy
Yes, it
and
is.
delicious and a perfect casserole you are gonna love.
Oh, so good.
Whether it was bubbling away in a church basement kitchen for a potluck, or pulled from the oven on a busy weeknight, hamburger hot dish was a reliable crowd pleaser. The ingredients were always simple and affordable, which was the whole point. Ground beef, of course, formed the base. To that, home cooks added chopped onions and maybe a few carrots or celery sticks, if there happened to be some lying around. Canned cream of mushroom soup was almost mandatory, binding everything together with its creamy texture. A layer of frozen vegetables added color and nutrition, while the topping could range from a crust of buttery breadcrumbs to crispy tater tots, which became especially popular in later versions. Making hamburger hot dish didn't require culinary finesse, just a sturdy casserole dish and a sense of timing. The beef was browned, combined with the vegetables and soup, then topped and baked until bubbly and golden. It was straightforward food meant to fill bellies and stretch the family budget without sacrificing flavor. Today, hamburger hot dish still has a devoted following, though it often carries a nostalgic charm rather than necessity. Some modern versions feature organic beef or gourmet mushrooms, but at its heart, it remains the same. It's a dish built on resourcefulness and love, bringing families together one hearty scoop at a time. Scalloped potatoes with ham. Scalloped potatoes with ham was the kind of dish that felt like a warm hug on a plate. The sort of comfort food that county fairs in the 1970s celebrated with pride. It was a recipe born out of practicality, making clever use of leftover holiday ham and humble pantry staples to create something hearty and satisfying. In those days, nothing went to waste. A few slices of ham from Sunday dinner, a sack of potatoes stored in the cool basement, and some milk and cheese were all it took to turn scraps into a meal fit for a blue ribbon. County fair cookbooks were filled with variations, each reflecting the personality of the cook who submitted it. Some recipes rich and cheesy, others simple and frugal, but all deeply rooted in the spirit of making do with what you had. The ingredients were straightforward and budget-friendly. Thinly sliced potatoes were layered with diced ham, onions, and a creamy sauce made from milk, butter, and a bit of flour. A sprinkle of shredded cheese was optional but always welcomed, and a dusting of paprika on top added both color and flavor. Some home cooks swore by adding a splash of evaporated milk or a pinch of mustard powder for extra richness, while others relied on a handful of breadcrumbs for a satisfying crunch. The preparation itself was simple but satisfying. The potatoes were sliced and layered carefully like shingles on a roof, with the ham tucked between them. After pouring the creamy sauce over the top, the dish was baked slowly until the potatoes turned tender and the edges bubbled into golden perfection. The smell alone was enough to bring everyone to the table before the oven door even opened. It was the kind of aroma that could make a house feel like a home. At county fairs, scalloped potatoes with ham often competed in the family dinner category, where judges looked not only for taste but for presentation and heart. It was a dish that told a story of thrift and love, of stretching ingredients to feed a crowd. Today, it might feel a bit retro compared to trendy grain bowls or plant-based meals, but it still holds a special place in many kitchens. Scalloped potatoes with ham is more than just a recipe. It's a bridge to the past, a reminder of family dinners where everyone crowded together, passing plates and stories, savoring a dish that turned simple ingredients into lasting memories. Green bean casserole. Green bean casserole is one of those dishes that feels like it has always been a part of the American table, especially during holidays and potlucks. By the 1970s, it had already cemented its place as a county fair favorite and a staple of community cookbooks. It wasn't flashy or complicated, but that was its strength. This was a recipe built on convenience, affordability, and flavor. A shining example of mid-century ingenuity where canned goods ruled the pantry and creativity came from making the most of what you had. The classic version was deceptively simple. Canned green beans, cream of mushroom soup, and a splash of milk were stirred together, creating a creamy, savory base. The crowning glory was a generous layer of crispy fried onions scattered on top, turning golden and crunchy as the casserole baked. Some home cooks jazzed it up with a handful of shredded cheese, diced pimentos for color, or a dash of soy sauce for depth, but the heart of the dish never changed. Making green bean casserole was quick and almost foolproof, which made it perfect for busy families and bustling fair kitchens. It could be assembled in minutes, baked until bubbly, and transported easily to church suppers, school events, or county fair contests. Its predictability was part of its charm. You always knew exactly what you were getting with that first creamy, crunchy bite. Today, green bean casserole is sometimes reinvented with fresh beans, homemade mushroom sauce, and gourmet toppings. Yet despite these upgrades, the original still holds a special nostalgia. It's more than just a side dish. It's a symbol of community gatherings and family traditions. Each bite connects us to decades of shared tables, proving that sometimes the simplest recipes are the ones that stand the test of time. Peach cobbler. Peach cobbler is the taste of summer captured in a baking dish, a dessert that has been bringing people together for generations. In the 1970s, when county fairs were in their heyday, peach cobbler was a beloved staple of both bake-offs and family gatherings. It wasn't just a dessert, it was a celebration of seasonal abundance. Many families grew their own peaches or bought them from local orchards, and turning that fresh fruit into a bubbling golden cobbler was a way of honoring the harvest. County fair cookbooks were filled with variations, each one claiming to be the flakiest, the sweetest, or the most likely to win that coveted blue ribbon. The beauty of peach cobbler lay in its simplicity. Ripe, juicy peaches were peeled, sliced, and tossed with sugar, a squeeze of lemon juice, and a pinch of cinnamon or nutmeg. Some recipes added a splash of vanilla or a drizzle of honey for extra depth. The topping could vary from a biscuit-like dough dropped in rustic spoonfuls to a buttery, cake-like batter that rose around the fruit as it baked. Either way, the result was the same. Warm peaches nestled beneath a golden crust, their juices mingling with the buttery topping to create something irresistible. Baking a peach cobbler was as much about ritual as flavor. The sweet, fragrant smell filled the kitchen, drawing family members to hover near the oven, waiting for the moment when it was finally ready. Served hot with a scoop of melting vanilla ice cream or a dollop of whipped cream, it was pure comfort. Today, peach cobbler might share table space with trendy desserts like creme brulee or tiramisu, but it remains timeless. Each bite carries the memory of summers past, family tables, and the simple joy of homemade sweetness. Whoopie pies. Whoopie pies are the kind of treat that brings out the kid in everyone. In the 1970s, these soft, sweet sandwiches were a staple of county fairs and bake sales, their cheerful appearance and irresistible taste making them crowd favorites. While their exact origins are often traced back to Amish and New England kitchens, by the time the 70s rolled around, whoopie pies had spread across the country, showing up in spiral-bound community cookbooks and proudly displayed on fair tables beside pies, cookies, and cakes. They were portable, playful, and just a little bit whimsical. Exactly the sort of dessert that captured the spirit of small-town gatherings. For many families, a whoopie pie recipe wasn't just a treat. It was a cherished tradition, passed down through generations with notes scribbled in the margins about oven quirks and favorite fillings. The classic whoopie pie was simple but perfect. 2 small round chocolate cakes, soft and slightly domed, sandwiched a thick layer of creamy filling. Traditionally, the filling was made with butter, sugar, marshmallow fluff, and a splash of vanilla, whipped until light and airy. Some bakers like to experiment, adding peanut butter, peppermint extract, or even a swirl of homemade jam. But the original vanilla filling was hard to beat. The contrast of the tender chocolate cakes with the sweet, fluffy center was pure magic, a balance that delighted fair judges and hungry kids alike. Making whoopie pies was a labor of love. The batter had to be scooped carefully so the cakes baked evenly, and once cooled, each pair was matched up like little edible soulmates before being filled and pressed together. Bakers at county fairs would often display stacks of them on doilies or in neat rows, tempting passersby with their plump, pillowy appearance. They were the perfect size for eating out of hand, no plate or fork required, which made them ideal for fairs, school events, and even lunchbox surprises. Today, you might see gourmet versions with red velvet cakes, cream cheese frosting, or elaborate decorations dusted with powdered sugar. But there's something undeniably special about the old-fashioned version, where simplicity and flavor take center stage. A bite of a classic whoopie pie still feels like a trip back in time, to crowded fairgrounds, sticky fingers, and the uncomplicated joy of a homemade treat shared with friends and family. Chocolate mayonnaise cake. At first glance, chocolate mayonnaise cake might sound like a kitchen mishap or a dare gone wrong, but in the 1970s, it was a beloved county fair classic. This humble dessert was a testament to frugality and resourcefulness, carrying forward traditions that dated back to the Great Depression and World War II. During those lean years, ingredients like butter and eggs were often scarce or expensive, so home bakers turned to mayonnaise, a pantry staple made from oil and eggs, as a clever substitute. By the time the 70s rolled around, this ingenious trick had become a full-fledged recipe, passed down through families and proudly featured in community cookbooks. The beauty of a chocolate mayonnaise cake lay in its simplicity. The ingredients were easy to find and affordable. Flour, sugar, cocoa powder, a generous scoop of mayonnaise, and a bit of baking soda and vanilla. No need to cream butter or carefully separate eggs. Everything was mixed together in one bowl, resulting in a batter that baked into an unbelievably moist and tender cake. Many fair recipes recommended a dusting of powdered sugar or a simple chocolate glaze, but some bakers went all out with swirls of buttercream frosting or a rich fudge topping. Baking this cake was straightforward, but the first bite was always a surprise to newcomers. No one could taste the mayonnaise itself. Instead, it lent a luxurious texture that rivaled even the fanciest bakery cakes. It was the kind of dessert that made people shake their heads and ask for seconds while secretly trying to guess the mystery ingredient. Today, chocolate mayonnaise cake might sound retro, even quirky, but it still has a devoted following. It's a delicious reminder that great baking isn't about extravagance. It's about creativity, resilience, and making something extraordinary from the simplest of ingredients. Date nut bread with cream cheese filling. Date nut bread with cream cheese filling was the kind of recipe that felt elegant yet down to earth, a slice of mid-century charm that carried well into the 1970s county fair scene. Back then, this bread wasn't just for breakfast or afternoon tea. It was a versatile treat that could appear at bake sales, church socials, or tucked into a picnic basket for a day at the fair. It had a certain old-fashioned sophistication, the kind of recipe that home bakers proudly handed down through generations and scribbled into the margins of spiral-bound cookbooks with notes like, "Add more nuts if company's coming." It wasn't overly sweet or showy, but it had a wholesome richness that made it a dependable favorite for any gathering. The base of the bread was simple and affordable. Chopped dates, often bought in small boxes from the baking aisle, were softened with boiling water and a bit of sugar, creating a rich, sticky paste that infused the bread with deep, caramel-like flavor. Flour, baking soda, and a handful of walnuts or pecans added structure and texture, while eggs and oil brought it all together into a moist, fragrant loaf. For some bakers, a splash of vanilla or even a hint of orange zest was their signature twist. The real magic, however, came from the filling. Cream cheese, lightly sweetened and whipped smooth, was layered or swirled into the batter before baking, giving each slice a decadent surprise. As the loaf baked, it filled the kitchen with a warm, nutty aroma that hinted at cozy mornings and special occasions. Once cooled, it could be served as is or with an extra smear of cream cheese for good measure, making it just as fitting for a Sunday brunch as it was for a county fair table. At the fair, date nut bread often stood out in the quick bread category. Judges admired not only its flavor, but also the evenness of its swirl, the shine of its crust, and the way the nuts were distributed throughout the loaf. Today, date nut bread might seem a little old-fashioned compared to flashy cupcakes or trendy pastries, but it still carries a quiet charm. Each slice is a taste of nostalgia, a reminder of a time when simple, well-made recipes were a baker's true badge of honor and a gift to be shared with friends, family, and neighbors. Peanut butter blossom cookies. Peanut butter blossom cookies are one of those treats that feel instantly familiar no matter where you grew up. In the 1970s, they were the star of county fair bake tables and cookie exchanges. Their irresistible combination of salty sweet peanut butter and rich chocolate, making them a guaranteed crowd pleaser. These cookies were both practical and celebratory, simple enough for everyday baking, but impressive enough to earn a blue ribbon. They were also a snapshot of the decade's love affair with convenience, as they showcased pantry staples that most families already had on hand. The ingredients couldn't have been simpler. Creamy peanut butter, sugar, flour, and an egg came together to form a soft, rich dough. The secret twist, of course, was the crowning touch, a Hershey's Kiss pressed into the center of each cookie as soon as it came out of the oven. This simple step transformed an ordinary peanut butter cookie into something special, both visually and flavor-wise. Watching the chocolate soften slightly and then set into place was part of the joy, especially for kids eager to sneak a warm cookie off the cooling rack. The preparation was easy and forgiving, which made it a favorite for busy home bakers. The dough was rolled into small balls, coated in sugar for a little extra sparkle, and baked until just golden. Then came that satisfying final flourish of chocolate pressed gently into the soft center. The result was a perfect balance of textures. The tender crumb of the cookie paired with the smooth, rich bite of chocolate. Today, peanut butter blossom cookies remain a holiday favorite and a nostalgic staple. Modern bakers might experiment with fancy chocolates or nut butters, but the original still reigns supreme, a timeless reminder that simple combinations often create the sweetest memories. Pickle dip spread. Pickle dip spread may not have the glamour of a towering cake or a golden pie, but in the 1970s, it was the quiet hero of many county fair gatherings and backyard parties. This simple, tangy creation was all about turning ordinary ingredients into something special, a skill every home cook of the era prized. Fair cookbooks often featured it alongside other quick appetizers, usually on pages smudged with fingerprints from frequent use, a sure sign that it was a trusted favorite. The ingredients were as humble as they come: chopped dill pickles, cream cheese, a little sour cream or mayonnaise, and a splash of pickle juice for extra punch. Some cooks like to add dried herbs, diced onions, or even a hint of garlic, while others kept it bare bones and straightforward. Everything was mixed together until creamy and smooth, then chilled to let the flavors meld. It was the kind of recipe that could be whipped up in minutes with whatever was on hand, making it perfect for last-minute guests or potluck obligations. Pickle dip was usually served with buttery crackers, celery sticks, or crisp chips, though a few adventurous cooks spread it between slices of white bread to create quirky little tea sandwiches. Its charm lay in its balance of flavors, the tangy bite of pickles against the rich, cool creaminess of the base. It was refreshingly different from the heavy cheese balls and overly sweet party spreads that often shared the table. Today, pickle dip has enjoyed a bit of a revival, thanks to the internet's obsession with all things dill flavored. You'll find fancy versions with artisan pickles or Greek yogurt, but the spirit of the dish remains unchanged. It's a nostalgic nod to simpler times when good company and a humble dip were all you needed to make a gathering memorable. Cabbage and noodle bake. Cabbage and noodle bake is one of those dishes that quietly tells the story of frugal home cooking, the kind that turns a handful of inexpensive ingredients into a comforting, crowd-pleasing meal. In the 1970s, this dish often appeared in county fair cookbooks submitted by proud home cooks who knew the value of stretching a dollar without sacrificing flavor. It has roots in Eastern European traditions, where cabbage and noodles were staples of the pantry, and it traveled to American kitchens through immigrant families who passed down recipes like treasured heirlooms. By the time it reached fair tables, it had been adapted to local tastes and ingredients. Yet it still carried with it a sense of heritage and resourcefulness. The ingredients were modest and easy to find. A head of cabbage, sliced thin, joined forces with tender egg noodles, onions, butter, and sometimes sour cream or cottage cheese for creaminess. A bit of salt and pepper was all it needed, though thrifty cooks might toss in leftover bacon, bits of sausage, or even a handful of shredded chicken for extra richness. Some bakers even added a splash of vinegar or a pinch of caraway seeds to give the dish a tangy, old-world flair. Nothing fancy here, just familiar flavors layered together in a casserole dish and baked until golden and fragrant. Preparation was straightforward, which made it perfect for busy weeknights or potluck suppers. The cabbage was sautéed until soft and slightly sweet, the noodles boiled until just tender. Then everything was combined with a creamy binder, topped with breadcrumbs or a sprinkle of cheese if the budget allowed, and baked until bubbly and irresistible. The smell of cabbage mingling with butter and noodles was enough to draw everyone to the kitchen before the timer even rang. At county fairs, this dish often appeared in the vegetable casserole category, where judges admired its balance of texture and flavor. Though it rarely stole the spotlight like a towering cake or a blue ribbon pie, it was a quiet contender that spoke to homey, everyday cooking. In today's world of meal delivery kits and gourmet recipes, cabbage and noodle bake might seem humble, even old-fashioned. But that's part of its charm. It represents an era when simplicity ruled the dinner table, and home cooks relied on creativity rather than expensive ingredients. Each forkful carries with it the warmth of shared meals, family stories, and the quiet triumph of making something wonderful out of very little. Zucchini fritters. Zucchini fritters are a dish that perfectly captures the spirit of summertime abundance and 1970s ingenuity. Back then, county fairs and community cookbooks were overflowing with recipes designed to tackle one common dilemma: what to do when your backyard garden exploded with zucchini. Anyone who's ever grown it knows the struggle. One day there are a few tender little squashes, and the next you've got a mountain of them growing faster than you can give them away. Enter the zucchini fritter, a recipe that turned garden excess into crispy, golden bites of comfort food. It was a simple, clever solution that transformed an overabundant vegetable into something families genuinely looked forward to eating. The ingredients were simple and budget friendly, which made this dish a natural fit for thrifty home cooks. Grated zucchini was mixed with flour, eggs, and a touch of milk to form a batter that held together beautifully when fried. A little salt and pepper were essential, and some cooks added onions, garlic, or shredded cheese for extra flavor. Others experimented with a pinch of dried herbs like basil or oregano, or even a dash of hot sauce to give the fritters a little kick. The mixture was then dropped by spoonfuls into a hot skillet and fried until each fritter was crisp on the outside and tender on the inside. The sound of sizzling oil paired with the savory aroma of frying zucchini was enough to make mouths water and draw everyone into the kitchen. Zucchini fritters were more than just a way to avoid wasting produce. They were a beloved summer side dish that brought families together, served with a dollop of sour cream, a drizzle of tangy tomato sauce, or even a sprinkle of Parmesan cheese. They were equally at home on a casual weeknight table or a county fair competition plate. At fairs, judges appreciated their balance of texture, crispy edges, soft centers, and just the right amount of seasoning. Kids who might have turned up their noses at plain zucchini often devoured fritters without complaint, making them a stealthy way to get more vegetables into family meals. Today, zucchini fritters remain a timeless recipe, though modern versions might feature gluten-free flours, air frying instead of pan frying, or trendy dipping sauces like sriracha mayo or avocado crema. No matter how they're dressed up, they still reflect a classic truth. Good food doesn't need to be complicated. With a little care, creativity, and a bumper crop of zucchini, you can turn a humble garden vegetable into a plate of crispy golden nostalgia. Squash casserole.
I'm showing you how to make the best squash casserole.
Squash casserole is one of those quintessential dishes that embodies the heart of home cooking, especially in the 1970s when county fairs celebrated the best of local gardens and kitchen ingenuity. Back then, gardens were overflowing with summer squash, zucchini, yellow crookneck, and other varieties that seemed to multiply overnight. Squash casserole became the go-to solution for using up those piles of fresh produce. A recipe that turned humble vegetables into something rich, creamy, and downright irresistible. The ingredients were simple and affordable, which was key for families watching their budgets. Tender slices of squash were cooked down with onions until soft and fragrant, then combined with eggs, milk, and often a handful of shredded cheese. A topping of buttery breadcrumbs or crushed crackers gave the casserole its signature golden, crunchy crown. For an extra indulgent touch, some cooks stirred in sour cream or a can of condensed cream soup, which was very much in vogue during that era. Preparation was straightforward, making it a perfect dish for busy home cooks. Once the squash mixture was assembled, it was poured into a well-loved Pyrex dish and baked until bubbling and beautifully browned on top. The smell of butter, cheese, and sweet squash wafting through the kitchen was enough to make everyone gather around the table early, forks at the ready. At its core, squash casserole was about more than just feeding a family. It was about celebrating the harvest and the tradition of sharing food made with love. Today, while the recipe has been updated in countless ways with modern twists like panko crumbs or artisanal cheeses, the essence remains unchanged. Every bite is a taste of nostalgia, a reminder of simpler times when garden bounty and a bit of creativity could bring comfort and connection to the table. Mock apple pie. Mock apple pie is one of those recipes that makes you do a double take. Apple pie without apples? It sounds like a culinary prank, but during leaner times, especially the Great Depression and later the 1970s when frugality was still a point of pride. This clever dessert earned its place in county fair cookbooks. The secret wasn't in fancy substitutes or lab-made ingredients, but in pantry staples that mimicked the taste and texture of apples so convincingly that even seasoned pie lovers were fooled. The star ingredient was something most kitchens had on hand: plain crackers, usually Ritz or soda crackers. When baked with sugar, cinnamon, lemon juice, and butter, the crackers softened and absorbed the spiced syrup, taking on the tender, slightly tart quality of cooked apples. A flaky, homemade, or store-bought crust held it all together, making the final product look and smell exactly like a traditional apple pie. The first bite was often met with disbelief, followed by laughter and a second slice just to be sure. Preparation was simple and thrifty. The crust was rolled out and filled with layers of crackers, while a boiling syrup of sugar, water, lemon juice, and cinnamon was poured over the top. Once the pie baked, the magic happened. The crackers transformed, and the kitchen filled with the unmistakable aroma of apple pie cooling on the counter. By the 1970s, mock apple pie was no longer just a necessity. It was a nostalgic treat, a reminder of how past generations had stretched what they had to create something special. Today, while real apples are readily available year-round, there's still a certain charm in baking this quirky classic. It's more than just dessert. It's a sweet slice of history, proof that creativity can turn even humble ingredients into a showstopper. Ambrosia salad.
I'm showing you how to make Grandma's ambrosia salad.
Ambrosia salad is a dish that practically glows with mid-century charm. A creamy, colorful relic of potlucks, church suppers, and 1970s county fairs. Despite its name, it's not really a salad in the modern sense. There are no leafy greens or vinaigrettes here, just a glorious jumble of sweet canned fruit, soft marshmallows, and creamy dressing that somehow became a staple of the American table. In a decade defined by convenience and abundance, ambrosia salad embodied both, making use of pantry staples and a flair for presentation that felt festive without being fussy. It wasn't just food, it was a centerpiece, a dish that could brighten any buffet table with its colorful, almost playful appearance. The ingredients were humble yet decadent in their own way. Cans of pineapple chunks, mandarin oranges, and sometimes fruit cocktail formed the base, their syrupy sweetness balanced by shredded coconut and a scattering of pastel mini marshmallows. The dressing usually consisted of sour cream or whipped topping, sometimes both, stirred together until silky smooth. A handful of maraschino cherries added a pop of color on top, ensuring the dish looked as cheerful as it tasted. Some cooks even tossed in chopped pecans or walnuts for crunch, or added a splash of canned juice to achieve that perfect balance of sweet and tangy. Preparation was blissfully simple, which only added to its appeal. Everything was mixed in a single bowl, then chilled until the flavors melded and the marshmallows softened into pillowy bites. It was a make-ahead dream dish, perfect for busy families or big gatherings where oven space was at a premium. Ambrosia was also endlessly adaptable. If a certain fruit wasn't available, you simply swapped in whatever was on hand. At county fairs, ambrosia salad often appeared alongside Jell-O molds and towering layer cakes, its creamy texture and tropical flavors standing out as something special. It wasn't just for dessert either. In many households, ambrosia made its way onto the dinner plate as a side dish, a quirk of mid-century menus that blurred the lines between sweet and savory. Today, ambrosia salad might seem like a quirky throwback compared to sleek modern desserts, but it remains beloved in many communities. It represents an era when fun, colorful food was celebrated and practicality reigned in the kitchen. Each spoonful is a sweet reminder of childhood picnics, potluck tables groaning under their weight, and the simple joy of sharing something homemade with friends and family. Jell-O mold surprise. Few dishes capture the spirit of 1970s. County fairs quite like the infamous Jell-O mold surprise. Bright, wiggly, and undeniably cheerful. It was a staple of church suppers, holiday tables, and local competitions where creativity was as important as flavor. Back then, Jell-O wasn't just a dessert, it was a canvas. The surprise could be anything from fruit and marshmallows to vegetables and even shredded cheese, depending on whether the dish was meant to be sweet or savory. In an era obsessed with convenience and presentation, nothing said festive quite like a perfectly molded, jewel-toned centerpiece. The ingredients were straight from the pantry and freezer, making this a budget-friendly crowd pleaser. Flavored gelatin packets provided the base with boiling water to dissolve them and cold water or fruit juice to set them. From there, the fun began. For sweet versions, home cooks added canned pineapple, mandarin oranges, strawberries, or pastel mini marshmallows. For the more adventurous or perhaps notorious recipes, items like shredded carrots, celery, or even cottage cheese were folded in. The final mixture was poured into a ring-shaped mold and chilled until firm, then ceremoniously unmolded with a dramatic wobble onto a fancy platter. Making a Jell-O mold wasn't difficult, but it did require patience and a touch of finesse. Timing was key, especially if you were creating elaborate, layered designs. Many a county fair hopeful learned this the hard way when an impatient unmolding resulted in a collapsed, sticky mess. Today, Jell-O molds might feel like relics of a bygone era, but they've seen a quirky resurgence thanks to nostalgia and social media. Whether you love them or laugh at them, they're a delicious reminder of a time when a simple box of gelatin could inspire endless creativity, and maybe a few raised eyebrows. Marshmallow Fluff Sandwich. The marshmallow fluff sandwich is childhood indulgence distilled into its purest form. A sweet, sticky creation that feels more like a dare than a meal. In the 1970s, this sugary delight was a staple of after-school snacks and lunchboxes, celebrated at county fairs and community gatherings where no one was counting calories. While peanut butter and jelly tried to maintain the illusion of balanced nutrition, the fluff sandwich made no such promises. It was dessert masquerading as lunch, and that was precisely its charm. The ingredients couldn't have been simpler. 2 slices of pillowy white bread, a generous smear of peanut butter on one side, and an equally generous layer of marshmallow fluff on the other. When pressed together, the peanut butter provided a salty, nutty contrast to the cloud-like sweetness of the marshmallow spread. The result was a flavor combination so perfect, it felt a little mischievous, like getting away with something you weren't supposed to have before dinner. Some kids, and a few adventurous adults, took things even further by adding chocolate chips, banana slices, or a drizzle of honey, transforming the already decadent sandwich into an over-the-top treat. Preparation was quick, which was part of its magic. No stove, no oven, no waiting. In less than a minute, you could have a snack that felt like a special occasion. It was a favorite among busy parents and impatient children alike, especially during summer breaks when a cool, no-cook option was especially welcome. Today, the marshmallow fluff sandwich lives on as a nostalgic comfort food, though it's often treated as a guilty pleasure rather than an everyday staple. In a world of organic nut butters and whole grain bread, it stands as a sweet, slightly rebellious reminder of simpler times, when joy could be measured in sticky fingers and melted marshmallow smiles. Cheese ball with nuts? The cheese ball with nuts was a centerpiece of 1970s entertaining, a retro party classic that managed to be both elegant and delightfully kitschy. No holiday gathering, county fair potluck, or neighborhood card game was complete without one proudly displayed on a platter, surrounded by a halo of buttery crackers. Back then, home cooks loved recipes that were equal parts simple and impressive, and the cheese ball delivered on both fronts. It was thrifty, make ahead, and just fancy enough to make guests feel like they were indulging in something special. In an era when convenience foods were booming, this dish struck a perfect balance between homemade charm and show-stopping presentation, making it a hostess's secret weapon. The ingredients were straightforward, which was part of the appeal. Cream cheese formed the base, whipped until smooth and velvety. Shredded cheddar or another flavorful cheese was folded in, along with a splash of Worcestershire sauce, a bit of mustard or hot sauce for zip, and seasonings like garlic powder or paprika. Chopped chives or parsley sometimes made an appearance for a bit of freshness and color. Once the mixture was blended, it was shaped into a ball, or occasionally a log, and rolled in a generous coating of chopped nuts, usually pecans or walnuts. The nuts weren't just decorative, they added a toasty crunch that perfectly balanced the creamy interior. Preparation was blissfully easy, making it a favorite for busy hostesses who needed to prepare multiple dishes at once. The cheese mixture could be made several days ahead, allowing the flavors to mingle and deepen in the refrigerator. On the day of the party, it only needed a quick roll in nuts and a dramatic unveiling on a decorative plate, often garnished with fresh herbs or a few extra nuts scattered around for flair. At county fairs, cheese balls often appeared in the savory appetizers category, where judges evaluated their balance of flavor, texture, and presentation. They were a reliable crowd pleaser, whether served with plain crackers, celery sticks, or even thin slices of crusty bread. Today, the classic cheese ball is experiencing a nostalgic comeback. Modern versions might feature sun-dried tomatoes, gourmet cheeses, caramelized onions, or even smoky bacon crumbles. But the heart of the recipe remains unchanged. It's a charming reminder of a time when gathering around a simple shared dish was reason enough to celebrate.